Have you ever been romantically involved with a sociopath? ASPD diagnosed? If so, is it actually a traumatizing experience? What is it like? I was with a man with this diagnosis for a time. He was violent and did seem genuinely baffled that not everyone shared his unempathetic views on things. I remember us seeing a news report on a woman who'd been shot and killed by her partner, and he said but maybe she cheated on him, as if this would make shooting someone perfectly acceptable. I was scared for my life. He threatened to shoot me one time, and as he was holding the gun kept wincing as if he was preparing for the loud noise. I got him to walk with me to the shop to try and de-escalate the situation, and while we were in the shop, I realized I could say something or scream, but I didn't. It made me realize how those situations happen. At the time I was so focused on extending my life second by second that keeping calm seemed the safest option. Screaming seemed likely to make him crack. Another time I went for a run and wished that I could keep running and never go back, but it was impossible. I felt trapped. It's hard to explain that feeling to someone who has not experienced it. This is only some of what happened. Eventually I moved out during one day. A family member agreed to put me up in a secret location. Luckily, he went to jail that same weekend. I thought I would never feel safe in my city again. This was over 10 years ago and I've seen him once since. He got on the train. I saw him but he didn't see me. That same fear came back and I got off straight away, shaking. I was with one but he was undiagnosed. It was the most traumatic years of my life. I was made to feel like the worst person. Everything was my fault. I trusted him entirely but he made me feel like everything was my fault. He emotionally abused me on every level. He didn't tell me that he had 3 children and one on the way from a past relationship and didn't see them the whole time we were together. He stopped providing for them too for a while. He completely destroyed me as a person even though he knew we had no future. I haven't been able to move on with anyone else since because of the damage he did. I've had therapy where my therapist said I might be a sociopath, but didn't want to confirm it yet. But I had an ex and I was the sociopath in the relationship. It was hard but I won't spare the details. But long story short, I did hurt him. Emotionally and physically. We broke up and he broke down. It left me weird, but I just felt pity for him. I still felt bad but it didn't last long. I didn't want to do it but I did. I had to break it off before he goes mentally depressed. So I made the right choice. My therapy sessions have been paused for a while since it's in school. I'm still friends with him, but it still comes out and I've been trying to avoid him. But it's killing me. I'm still trying to get better but I sometimes think I might hurt again. And it's a 50/50 in me. I think my ex-girlfriend did. I really don't want to talk about all of it, because the memory of it honestly makes me feel terrified that people like this just exist in society. She was my first girlfriend, so I think she pinpointed me as being inexperienced. It's now a year and a half after it ended, and I'm still having waves of depression and a lot of social anxiety. It's terrifying for me. Whenever I look at a bunch of people, I just think about the fact that any one of them could completely freak up my mind. I got 5 comments into this thread before I started hyperventilating. It struck a nerve that made me so anxious. I dated one when I was 20ish and he was the same. We'd be driving through town and he'd look at strangers on the sidewalks and insult them with slurs. Strangers just walking by. He hit a deer once and the impact didn't kill it, so he did with his bare hands. I know he liked it. He cheated on me and gloated about it later. Just loved causing me and other people pain. Felt no sympathy when my dad was in the hospital. Couldn't even try to comfort me. He was later diagnosed as narcissistic, bipolar, and I'm not sure but I suspect sociopathic as well. He just thought he was better than anyone else. I married a man before we lived together and let me tell you, that was dumb. He was at the minimum a complete narcissist and at worst a sociopath. He love bombed me so hard I was completely clueless to the red flags I should have seen. I knew he lacked empathy but for some reason I thought I could deal with that. Once we lived together it was horrible. Classic gaslighting, control, manipulation. I was never right. I was never enough. It was all me. I was super lucky I was a strong person and realized that he was really freaked up. but he would apologize and say that he was going to try, and I stupidly believed him. He embarrassed me in front of my family, in front of his family, made people believe I was a ridiculous person, would gang up on me with his friend. It was truly an awful experience. So yes, it's extremely damaging. I am lucky I got out after 2 years with my sanity still intact, but only because I knew it wasn't me. But he really did a number on me anyway. He literally did not have the capacity to care about how I felt in the slightest. He was super smart too, which made it even worse. I could never catch up. He wasn't even playing on the same level. It's an experience I wouldn't recommend to anyone. But oh, he was so charming and so fun to be with before I found out who he really was. Yes, for 2.5 years. It started out just like any relationship. We started dating in high school and I thought he was a nice guy. He had some trouble in the past, such as a fight with another student at a different school, but nothing more serious. As we continued dating, I started to get an off feeling about him, like the feelings I had for him were not the same as his. It's like he was faking feelings for me to manipulate me. I remember one time he said he was afraid to lose me, tears included, and it seemed so genuine. Later I would find out from him it was straight manipulation. Later on in the relationship I asked him what his feelings were for me. He explained it like this: "For me you are like my knife. You are my favorite possession and I will protect you from anything." Me being naive, I didn't realize what he was actually saying and shrugged it off. I also learned he had history of torturing small wildlife but didn't think anything of it. Once I graduated high school I went to a university close to my hometown. He was a year below me, so he was still in high school. This I feel is when things got worse. He would tell me that my friends were not good for me, which made me lose contact with people I was close with. He would always want me to hang out, possibly so I wouldn't hang with friends. The emotional manipulation continued even after he graduated and moved to a different city for college. He would have me drive 2 hours to see him on weekends and yet never do the same for me. He really had a hold on me and made me feel that he was the only important person in my life. He eventually broke up with me since he had feelings for another girl. I then find out he had been talking to other girls the entire time we were dating and decided to just keep using me until he got tired of me. Thankfully my family and friends were very helpful in bringing me back from the depression I felt after the breakup. I am now in a serious relationship with a man who truly loves me. He was never fully diagnosed as having ASPD but did display a lot of the symptoms presented in the DSM-5 that makes me believe he did have it. That relationship was emotionally traumatizing and made me think hard about myself and what I actually deserved when it came to relationships. This is great. I saw a hater up there. I get it. It's really hard to tell, and I don't fault you for questioning. I've met more than my share of people saying the same when it turns out baby daddy is actually single father of the year. Yes, I'm quite certain my daughter lacks empathy. I don't know another kid quite like her. She is 13. I can count the number of times I've seen her cry since she was a toddler. No nightmares. None of the usual kid stuff. No games or songs. No cuddles. She's cold as ice and seems to like that about herself. She is as manipulative as the day is long. But after many battles we've found an equilibrium. After some issues with faked emotions and weirdness and punishing the pets, we had a nice talk about her superpowers. Therapy for both of us. Teaching her to focus differently, to choose her battles, and find new ways to express her ability to twist reality has really helped. She's actually pretty impressive. That strange charm. Everyone loves her. She's able to sway an audience, convince people to do her bidding. She has no social anxiety, no interest whatsoever in dating. Black belt, honor society. She has a single-minded goal and nothing else matters. I've had to teach her to understand what could be painful for other people, how to interact and show love, as any mother would for any child. It is just a bit slower than other kids I've met. She has the most terrifying tantrums. LOL. Never laughed. She still seldom smiles unless she's up to something. Her stepmom and I joke about what will happen to the boy that hurts her. But yeah, being ASPD doesn't have to be bad. She's a rock star. Since I started working with her on redirecting her anger, doing the CBT stuffs, and just explaining the logic behind everything, she's just the most amazing kid. Karate, OMG, karate has helped so much. Being publicly accountable for her behavior made some pretty grand changes. I really can't express how absolutely cool this kid is. Questions authority, takes no crap, doesn't put her goals aside for boys, good grades, liberal social justice warrior, strong concept of lawfulness and fairness without the social anxiety, but I wouldn't want to date her. I've noticed some mention of the lack of posts from the partners of females with ASPD. I don't fit that profile, but I'm a woman at the higher end of the ASPD spectrum with comorbidity in cluster C, obsessive compulsive. Many of these responses seem to be describing just crappy behavior or, perhaps, other cluster Bs rather than ASPD, and even fewer seem to be referencing diagnosed people. I'll answer some questions if I get any whilst I'm still here. My attention span for this won't be great. From what I understand, women with ASPD typically have reasonable cognition of others' emotions. I don't feel them or understand emotions beyond an intellectual level, but I can compensate for the empathy deficit when I'm compelled to invest the energy. My way of thinking is lateral. Previously I had been incorrectly diagnosed as being on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum. The only things approximating feelings that I experience are boredom, some vested interest in one family member, and, usually short-lived, interest in romantic partners. During my childhood, I learned that other children found me weird or intimidating, so I taught myself to mimic facial expressions, appropriate responses, and life in my eyes. When I'm alone and in my relaxed state, my face is devoid of all expression and my voice is completely monotone. I'm not a malignant narcissist and my baseline usually isn't malicious. I have no personality beyond a few shreds of traits here and there. I do have some sadistic traits, but I'm quite controlled in terms of how I indulge in those. I'm conventionally good looking, of above average, but not genius level, intelligence, and I can be charming when I switch it on. People generally like me. It's a living hack. You want to believe the positive is sincere, but not even that is for your benefit. It has to be positive to them, and that's all that's important. Frick everyone else in the room. I was with a sociopathic narcissist for 10 years. Finally got divorced a year ago, but because we have a child together it will be another 10 years before I fully get away from him. The 10 years I was with him was absolute torture. I went to therapy for 5 of those years thinking I was the problem. When the therapists would meet him for marriage counseling, they tried telling me what he is. I was too delusional to believe it because he would talk circles around me. Leaving him was the best thing I ever did. He made me suicidal on multiple occasions due to his treatment. I did, and it wasn't traumatizing at all. It was just strangely bizarre. We spent 4 years flirting, making dates, me thinking things were going somewhere, and then him dropping off the face of the planet. Sometimes I was crushed. Sometimes I was baffled. Sometimes I just knew it didn't mean anything, I guess. So one day he takes me to the beach. We kiss. It's all super exciting. And he tells me that he's a sociopath. He can't feel other people's feelings at all. He gets it from his dad. It runs in the family. And he apologizes for any pain he might have caused me. So I suppose he was raised right. He just got married recently. Hope they're happy. She probably just figured out how to get along with him without being crushed by his absent-mindedness. I could probably figure it out now if I really tried. He is a cool and interesting person. The most traumatizing experience of my life thus far. 0/10 haha. Every day you are a disappointment and longing for a love you will never receive. However, you can't just pick up and leave because you're trapped. You love them. You couldn't imagine life without them. They abuse daily, but you blur that out. Once you're free you begin to see. Yes. 1/2 years. My daughter's dad. Diagnosed via court-ordered psych evaluation during the course of our highly contested custody litigation. Thankfully, she and I haven't had contact with him in several years now, after he realized that, since daughter is getting older and more articulate, if he continued exercising his visitation rights he was going to be charged with abuse and or neglect. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I've had a lot of therapy, AMA. 5-year relationship. Lost my virginity to him, and also have a daughter with him. It started out okay. He had a lot of pain, a lot of problems. I thought it was something we could work on together. I made excuses for him. It was so bad. but you never really notice until you get out of it. It starts with emotional abuse, then physical, sexual, then I'll kill myself if you leave me to if I can't have you, no one else can. Eventually he told me he was going to chop me into pieces, feed me to pigs and rip my teeth out so they couldn't identify my body. He's currently awaiting sentencing for shooting someone in the face and shooting another in the leg. Married to one for 15 years. It is a living nightmare. Traumatizing does not even begin to describe it. When you discover everything you know is a lie. When you discover you were a pawn in their game. When you doubt what you discovered because you were trained to be afraid to doubt them. When you discover they lack the ability to feel remorse or empathy. When you realize you are tied to them for life through a child. When you realize they value nothing but themselves and their next compulsive fix. When you realize they will hurt their own child to maintain their cover. When you realize they have isolated you from everyone you ever knew. When no one believes you because this person was that good at making it your fault. When you describe massively fricked up moments that you have become desensitized to because it's a daily occurrence. When all of what I just said is 1/100 of the trauma. Because I fear for me and my child's safety if I give identifiable specifics. And when we were probably your next door neighbors who waved sweetly every day and our kids played together. I've been reading a lot of these comments and there's one thing I would like to say. Most of the people in these stories are actually psychopaths. Sociopaths are extremely narcissistic and have almost no impulse control. They do have a weak conscience, but it doesn't stop them from doing what they do. Yes, they lack empathy, but that isn't guilt. A psychopath, however, is charming, cunning, intelligent, a great actor. Psychopaths do the things they do for their own gain and they can be very meticulous in how they do things. They understand that certain behaviors are required for certain situations and are usually very good at portraying them. Ted Bundy was a psychopath. Bernie Madoff is a sociopath. If you find yourself in a relationship with someone you suspect to be a psychopath, get yourself out of there. They don't love you. They want something from you. Whether it be status among peers, maybe you come from money, whatever it may be, they have no real love for you. You won't fix them. I was the one diagnosed with ASPD. I've since gotten help and I'm doing much better. It definitely traumatized my ex. I was horrible to my ex. Granted, she wasn't amazing either, but that's besides the point. I still feel bad about things I did to her. I remember how manipulative I was. That is, saying things and getting angry if she didn't want to have sex. I remember yelling at her in public because she took a selfie of us at the wrong angle. I'm sure that was the narcissism that comes along with that. I had such a short fuse and she would walk on eggshells and cower BC. I would tell and get extremely angry over the slightest things. I tried to turn her against her sisters and friends BC. I felt like they were influencing in a negative way. Because of the diagnosis it was easy for me to be horrible to her. I didn't care BC. All that mattered was myself. I was the only person in the world that mattered and everyone else was lower than me. Of course lots more happened but I won't divulge anymore. It haunts me how horrible I was to this day. I wish I could say sorry genuinely because I did once after we broke up. Only then I was looking for sex, not being sincere. She blocked me on everything because I yelled at her and told her to never speak to me again after I saw her on Tinder after we broke up. It pains me so bad that I can't say sorry and I'm sure she wouldn't want to hear it. It has been a little over a year now and I can confidently say I'm much better. I'm abstaining from a relationship currently till I feel I'm ready. I don't want to repeat the past. Moral of the story, there is help out there. Get it. It doesn't make you weak to get help. I thought my condition made me stronger. I felt like I had power. That's the opposite of the truth. Don't hurt the ones you love because when you need them most they won't be there. Eventually you'll be alone. It will haunt you for years. Take it from me. Sociopaths are not necessarily narcissists. What does that mean? The average one isn't going to be evil just because it could benefit them. Remember, they have lack of emotions. That extends onto themselves for the most part. Most of them just go through the motions of what they have been taught is normal. Seriously. I know this girl in my high school, and I swear she had no regard for anyone but herself, except I didn't know that until after we hooked up. After that event, she started asking me to tell one of our mutual friends how good she was, who is asexual and didn't even like the thought of kissing. Later on that summer, She would hit me up with sexting and stuff like that, and a lot of it involved pain. A few days after that, she started talking about how she could kill me if she wanted to, drive me to suicide, etc. That she had the power to end a life. She was also super poetic about random things, like eyes or hands. She'd talk about how she willingly walked on gravel to feel the pain of it, or burn herself. I don't talk to her at all anymore, but the image of her reminds me of that night she threatened my life as well as my friends. It was terrifying. Yep. X was a sociopath with narcissistic tendencies and an almost total detachment from reality. He was so charismatic and sure of himself though, it was really hard not to be swept away by it all. After we separated, a few people told me he was like a cult leader. The relationship was 18 months of gaslighting, ostracizing me from my support network, withholding attention affection if I didn't behave the way he advised me to, and man, the temper tantrums he would throw if he didn't get his own way. From smashing his guitar around the room, to physically beating the crap out of himself in front of me, blaming me for it, running towards traffic as if he was about to kill himself, so I'd run to stop him and give in. He'd cause arguments intentionally, and admitted that he often did so to create drama because he was bored. We had a stillbirth through that time, and within a day he was on my case to be performing with him. He emailed me months later apologizing, making excuses for his behavior but said he's just unwell. No thought to the ongoing trauma that relationship caused me. He got us kicked out of every house we stayed in, left a trail of emotional discord in his wake and blamed me for all of it. When I tried to escape him he would sleep in the field across the road from where I was staying, or at the train station for days hoping I'd relent and take him back. He'd come to my work and stalk around, getting removed by security on 2 occasions. I ended up having to move states in order to get away. I own that I chose him. I chose to allow him into my life and I chose to stay for 18 months. But I was young and impressionable, and he took advantage of that. Never, ever again will I let anyone have so much control influence over my life. Not really romantically, but I had a crush on him for a while before we became best friends. I used to tell him I loved him, and he would stare at me blankly and reply with, "Oh." He never cried. I watched him get hit with a baseball bat in the balls and he just sat there and held them. His dog died. He didn't cry. I wrote him a song to show him how much I loved him, and he didn't care. Messed me up big time and now I have difficulties telling my complicated boy relationship partner dude that I love him. My sister is a sociopath. She only dates people with mental disorders, minorities, so she can constantly guilt them into stuff. Every relationship she's been in, she's yelled at them, "You're only dating me because I am white." I'm married to one for over 10 years who would describe himself as such. He is on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum, and he describes himself as being a lot like a computer. Very logic driven, high creativity and problem solving. Suitable as an engineer, but doesn't get too emotional about stuff. Not that he can't feel emotions, and he has at times felt uncontrollably angry on something, but I can count on one hand in the 15 years we have been together. But he is very aware since a young age he doesn't have the same emotional response to things as almost everyone around him, and he knows he doesn't have much empathy to people. He finds Sherlock Holmes as played by our DJ as very relatable, especially the scene where he is getting overstimulated by his environment and just not really caring about things others get angsty over. He has cultivated as a result over the years, in his words, a more human-seeming social facade he shows to others. That said, he has a strong connection to me, our kids, and his mother, and in times of crisis or a family emergency, father dying, my parents' pet getting severely injured, it's like he turns off all emotion, gets to problem solving, and his cool head helps us get through. It's actually been comforting that he can do it if I'm emotionally falling apart. So yeah, I guess my husband and I are the anomaly here. In the literal sense of sociopath of a lack of conscience, yes. Chronic liar, and me being young I didn't know any better. I ended up getting her pregnant and I knew it was for the best that she not raise her own daughter. So in our divorce I made sure to get custody. Everything turned out well. for my daughter. I on the other hand found out a number of years later my daughter wasn't biologically related to me. Many men that could be considered a nightmare scenario, and for me it was for a while and I still have trouble with it honestly. But I am glad my daughter didn't have to grow up with her mother and only has to interact with her when my daughter, wants. I was married for a few years to a sociopath. She has me twisted around her little finger. She love bombed me. Seems like my perfect partner. Would say everything I wanted to hear, whilst steadily manipulating me to get whatever she wanted. I ended up working my butt off while she studied, when she was actually juggling other guys and doing coke. I found out she tried to convince me it was all my fault and I should apologize and stop being so controlling. Let her live her dreams and support her financially. I fortunately had the emotional fortitude despite being devastated to say no more. So she took me for a small fortune and the divorce and stuffed much of my hard-earned money up her nose. So many people told me they wanted to warn me. Told me how something always seemed off about her. 10 years later she still writes to me about how much she misses me and how she's forgiven me for the way I treated her and we should talk. Yet, I still have copies of all the messages and photos to other guys. Of the messages to her only friend saying what a thrill it was and how easy I was to manipulate. It took me years of therapy and self-flagellation to get over the guilt I felt at letting this be done to me. How foolish I had been to give my trust to someone so cruel. I've come to accept though that the fault was not with me. I did my best, and I wanted to believe in her and build something. She's the one who lied and tore everything apart. Those years are now a fading scar. For a long time it was a festering wound, but now it's part of me which led to better things. I emigrated, and now live an infinitely better life with someone who deserves and earns my trust every day, who I respect and love, and who reciprocates. That thing I knew is still in the same place, still ripping her own and her chosen victims' lives apart. I don't take any joy from this, but it doesn't make me feel like scrubbing every inch of my skin clean any longer. I was married to one. He's an officer in the army. He constantly talked about how much the army loves sociopaths and how great they are. Every other person was out to get him and he claimed it was that he had a strong personality. It was a very classic start. He loved me, thought I was great and was worthy of him. Fights were really dramatic. I was young enough to be enthralled with the man in uniform idea. My therapist finally convinced me I have PTSD responses from being in a relationship with him, mostly because he would deny things that happened. Being a sociopath, he's very convincing. He would get blackout drunk and have complete meltdowns, punching holes in the walls or throwing bottles at me. Being far away from my family and support, I had a hard time vocalizing what was going on. If anyone called him out on it, he would start talking about his old deployments and how awful it was. As a deflection method, I let him use that as an excuse for a long time. I now realize this is a common method of someone with a borderline personality. I would be the bad one for not putting up with him because he had wrapped himself in the flag. Even to this day when I have to deal with him, he claims none of it ever happened. I sometimes call friends who were there to make sure my memories are real. I also have the worst body image. I'm a competitive athlete, even in my 30s. And if I went to the gym I was being vain, and if I didn't I was unattractive. There's still tons of guilt over leaving because a lot of close people don't understand. Sociopaths are great at wearing masks. Hopefully I'll find someone great one day. I just don't think I'll ever be able to believe anything they like about me because I'm used to waiting for anything good to be used against me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.